Welcome to Bled Talk, the podcast that helps you master the English language through everyday conversations. I'm your host, Samuel Bledsoe, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this language learning journey. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced learner, Bled Talk is here to provide you with engaging and immersive content that will enhance your English skills in no time. Each episode will dive into a conversation between native English speakers, discussing interesting and relatable topics. You'll get to hear natural, authentic English being spoken, allowing you to pick up new vocabulary, idioms, and improve your pronunciation along the way. Bled Talk isn't just about language learning. It's about building connections and fostering a global community. We encourage you to participate by sending in your questions, topic suggestions, or even recording yourself speaking English. We'll feature some of your submissions in our episodes to create an interactive learning experience. So whether you're a student, a working professional, or simply someone who wants to expand their horizons, join us on Bled Talk, where learning English becomes an enjoyable journey. This is Samuel Bledsoe, and you're listening to Bled Talk. Let's get started. Before we get started today, don't forget to follow or subscribe. It helps us out a ton. Now let's get started. Welcome everybody to Bled Talk this week. I am Samuel Bledsoe and your host, and I am here with my mom, actually. Her name is Wendy, and I just wanted her to tell us a little bit about her and kind of give us a perspective because, as most of you know, I'm from the Midwest of the United States, but she's from the South. And so I think it would be really interesting for everybody to learn a little bit about the southern region of the United States. So Wendy, or Mom, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and kind of tell us your story, how you got to where you are.
All right. Well, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. It's kind of in the northern-ish part of Georgia. And I was born in the 70s, not to get exact, ladies don't tell their age. Southern ladies, anyway, don't tell their age. But I was born in the 70s. So, what I'm going to talk about today may be a little dated, but yeah. And I grew up there, went to school all through elementary school, high school, all of that. And then went to college out in Idaho, which is out west, which you talked about in a previous podcast. And that is where I met Samuel's dad. And then he was from Illinois, from where we live. And I came back here with him. That's how I got to here. So that's about it. Not very exciting.
Well, that's cool. How long have you been in Illinois?
We came here in 1994, so going on 29 years.
Wow, 29 years.
I know, right? I realized that the other day. Crazy.
That is crazy. Do you ever miss the South at all? Do you ever miss living in Atlanta or close to it?
Yeah. Yes. We used to talk about going back, and it just hasn't happened. We're just going to live in Illinois for a little bit and then maybe go back to Georgia or Tennessee or somewhere. And we just haven't made it yet.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, there's a lot of things, life. And there was my brother, then there was me, then there was my sister. And it just, life runs its own course.
Time flies.
So obviously you've been around the United States a little bit. So where have you traveled throughout the world, excluding the US?
Oh gosh. I've been to several places. Let's start with when I was in middle school, about 11, I went to France, to Paris, and which was way cool. No, there aren't very many 11-year-olds in Georgia that get to go to France. And then I've been to London twice. which that's still English, so not really all that different. Then I've been to several Caribbean islands. I've been to Brazil now. Went there last in January, so not very long ago. Um, I think that about completes it.
Have you been to Mexico or no?
Oh, yeah, that was on one of our cruises that we've been on. I've been to Mexico, I guess twice. I forgot all about that. I was thinking just Caribbean islands, but you're right. We did go to Mexico.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's good. And how important do you think it was that you were able to be able to speak English? Like where you traveled to, did most people speak English enough to be able to help you?
I'd say yes. I mean, probably of all the places other than like Brazil, I had you there to translate, so that was nice. But like France, back in the 80s, there really weren't, they didn't do a whole lot of English, just the regular people, but it was enough. But I also had taken a little bit of French, so I knew a little bit. Um, but we got by.
Yeah. No, I think that speaking English is something that's really important. And as much as I think that a lot of Americans, we kind of take for granted that English is our native language, and the rest of the world speaks so many different
Right.
languages. But yet when it comes to the corporative world and any type of traveling, English is always a strong option to have.
Well, there's all these, like, we've gone on several of these cruises, and all these people that are on there, they're able to improve their life greatly by working on these cruise ships, and they're speaking English, because they know English, they can work on these cruise ships and improve their lives. All these islands we go to, I know that that's not their native language, but these people learn English, and they're able to make a living for themselves by entertaining all these people who do speak English. So I think, like you said, it's just a huge kind of universal thing. It's so important.
Definitely. And just by speaking English, there's so many people that can have better careers, better opportunities. Um,
Right.
I know some people here. There was one time my wife, she was looking for a job, and she found two identical positions, but one paid an extra 1,500 reais just because the person was fluent in English. So,
Wow.
English can really help in a
Right.
lot of the
Absolutely.
situations. But,
Absolutely.
but yeah, very cool. So I want to talk a little bit about the South. Like you said, it's been a little while since you were living there all the time, but living in Southern Illinois, I think there's a lot of Southern influence as well.
I agree.
And obviously, you've been back to the South many times to visit mom and dad and all those things. So, what do you believe are some defining characteristics of Southern culture in the U.S.?
Oh, I think that being polite to one another. You've heard the expression, "Oh, bless their heart," and that you're even being polite when you're about to insult somebody in the South. Um, I mean, that's pretty much what that means. But you're always polite. You talk to everybody, and it's almost like it's awkward to not talk to somebody who's standing near you. It reminds me a lot of what you've explained with some of the Brazilian culture. Everybody kind of talks to each other. They're very friendly, very outgoing with each other.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you've got you took that on. I know.
Yeah, it was different because it's interesting. A lot of people here when they think of Americans, they tend to think that we're very cold and closed off, that we don't talk to a lot of people. But I think it's because they haven't heard of that Southern culture where you
Right.
talk to everybody. I remember being young and you would just talk to people in the grocery store, and I was like, "Who was that?" And you're like, "I don't know. I met them today." And I always thought it was interesting. When I was a kid, I would get a little annoyed because it would take longer.
Embarrassed.
It would
Yeah.
take longer to leave, and it was embarrassing. But as an adult, I can see a lot of good things that come from doing that.
My dad used to flirt with every person, every female that there was that we go to the grocery store. I mean, he would flirt with. I mean, I thought it was flirting. Now I just think he was just talking. But I was just like, oh, he always was talking to him, always flirting with him. And your granddaddy, he has kind of that Southern gentleman
Hmm.
way about him. So yeah, that's what it is. You just everyone talks to everyone, and everybody's very, at least on the outside, is very respectful.
Yeah. Could you could you explain a little bit what a Southern gentleman would be, and maybe even like a Southern lady?
They're very proper, and in a way that maybe that they talk, the way that they dress. They're always, I mean, have you, very rarely up until maybe the last couple years, did you ever see your granddaddy wear just like t-shirt?
Nope.
And it's always in a button-up shirt and slacks, and especially when he goes out. um and you think about like his wife, my stepmother, she's always, when she leaves the house, she's always dressed,
Always,
decently in her
always dressed to
makeup.
impress. Yeah.
Yeah, and I that's part of it. And just somebody who, I, they I think it's more just how they talk too,
Yeah.
and how they address people very formally.
And I think that another big thing that comes from that is that they're nice to people even when they don't like the people.
Right.
That's something that's very defining because there's
Yes.
other places where if someone doesn't like you, you're very aware of it. But in the South, it's kind of difficult to know if somebody doesn't like you or not.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's polite, but then you also, as a child, you almost don't get taught how to express your real feelings sometimes, though, too. So there's that, because you don't know, you don't want to get mad at somebody. That's not polite. It's not the Southern thing to do.
Right. No, definitely. Do you have anything else about the defining characteristics? Anything
Um,
in mind?
well, it's just a really, I think, I don't know if this comes in somewhere else that we're going to talk about, but I feel like the lifestyle in the South is very, it's more, it's slow, it's laid back. Uh, it's kind of, I don't want to say lazy, but you almost think of it as that, just really taking it easy. I think whenever they can, you have work and you have to do what you got to do, but everything else is very, it's a lot more laid back than maybe like the Northeast. Up north, they always so fast. They talk fast. They walk fast, and not in the South.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think
Slow as molasses.
it's a very good description.
Slow
Could
as molasses.
Yeah, could you describe any unique traditions or customs? Anything that's really celebrated in the South that you think is kind of unique to that area?
Oh, I don't know. I was thinking about that and couldn't really think of a whole lot, but I do know, and one of the things I remember is on New Year's. All over the world, everyone, which is kind of cool about New Year's, is pretty much everyone celebrates New Year's. Even in China, they celebrate it maybe at a different time, but they celebrate. Everyone celebrates New Year's, and in the South, what you do is one of the things that you eat on New Year's Day, which is gross, but it's okay, is black eyed peas.
Oh, yeah.
I know, right?
Hmm.
They're okay, but they kind of taste like dirt.
Yeah.
And and well, the tradition, the folklore is that you get one day of good luck for every black eyed pea that you eat. So, that was always one day that I would eat black eyed peas.
Eat
Um,
365 of them.
yeah, yeah, that's a lot. I'm sure there's lots of things that are very Southern that we just didn't participate in. I don't know. I'll probably think of something else.
What do you
What am I
know if there's
talking?
is there any dances that you think are popular in the South that aren't as much
Well,
in
it used to be people would do square dancing. I don't know if you've ever seen square dancing before.
I had to do it in PE once.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember at church, they would have like square dancing activities and teaching people how to square dance. And that you have a caller, you have somebody who calls it and they tell you what to do, swing your partner round and round. I don't
Do-si-do.
think they do that a whole lot anymore,
Yeah.
but no, not really any.
Yeah. No, okay, that's cool. What about the food in the South?
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so many people here that tell me that American food is not that tasty, or that it's just all it is fast food. And I always tell them that they have to go to the South. If you want good food in the United States, you need to go to the South.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, to find yourself a good Southern restaurant to go to. Yeah, the best, of course, fried chicken. There's no better place in the whole United States than the South to have your fried chicken. They do it all over the United States, but the South is where you want to go. Um, you got turnip greens, which I do not like, but a lot of people really like them. And I would think if somebody was going to the South, you'd probably need to try them. It's a big leafy green thing, kind of like.
They eat something similar to that here with feijoada. It's like they like cook the leaf and it just turns into a mush.
Yeah. Not my favorite. Not my favorite. Um, a lot of like tomato things, like tomato sandwiches, which, not a lot of people think of that as something that you would eat, would just be having two pieces of bread with a tomato and mayonnaise. Do you remember calling me on the phone at work and asking me?
I do remember, but that's because they're good. Well,
How do you make a tomato sandwich?
I thought that there was a secret. I thought that, and there was a secret. There was something that I didn't know. When you make the sandwich, you have to toast the bread. I knew that part, but I didn't know that you needed to put salt and pepper. So I would have just put mayonnaise and tomatoes, and it would have not been.
You gotta have that salt and pepper. So it's just listening. Just have a tomato with toasted bread, mayonnaise, salt, and pepper.
Yeah.
Big thick slice. Banana sandwiches with mayonnaise. Banana.
I think anything with mayonnaise is pretty.
Mayonnaise is huge, huge. Which it's so funny. Just when we were visiting you, so there are some big similarities in where you live in Brazil and in the South in the United States. I think people where you live would feel they would even feel at home.
Yeah, but I think in the South, but the actual South of the United States. Because sometimes people go to
Florida.
They go to Florida, and Florida is like that's where people retire. That's
like transplanted northern Midwesterners. Yeah. They transplanted there. It's not real.
All the people who are tired of cold weather just moved to Florida.
Yeah.
Let's say they're South, Georgia, Alabama, North and South Carolina.
You gotta have some fried okra though.
Oh yeah.
Love me some fried okra. Fried okra, biscuits and gravy.
Oh, biscuits and gravy. It's amazing. I have friends that tell me that they don't like biscuits and gravy, and I tell them that's because you haven't had Southern biscuits and gravy.
The right way.
It can be bad if you don't know how to make it.
Right.
Well, my brother's very specific about how he likes his
yes. Yes, he is. Yeah, you can go on and on about the food. There, mac and cheese, right? Baked mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese. It's mac and cheese from the South is nothing compared to. It's everything. It's much more compared to any other mac and cheese that you have.
Right.
The mac and cheese in the South is hands down the best mac and cheese you'll ever find. They have the creamy kind. They have the kind that's not, but it's all tasty and it's all good.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then Go ahead.
No, good.
So what, kind of staying on the food topic just for a second. What's the big, what's the big soda in the South? How do you call soda in the South? Because where we live, where I used to live, we call it soda. But I know people who call it pop, and I know
Yeah.
people call it soda pop. But in the South, what do they call
And
it?
they just call it what it is. Call it Coke, call it Sprite, you call it Dr. Pepper. You want to go get I would say more than anything, probably a Coke, even if you're going to get root beer.
Yeah,
You want a Coke?
so that's
You
what
know,
kind of Coke you want.
yeah. So if they're going to generalize anything, I would say they would call it a Coke.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with you. Do you have anything else about food? Any type of food that you wanted to mention?
Not really food, but something that's really big. I don't drink it, but like sweet tea is huge. You hear about it in all the country songs. You hear about it. You go into the restaurants. Sweet tea is everywhere. My grandparents drank it. I don't, but that's a huge thing if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And
Iced
I
tea,
hear
sweet
the
iced
same
tea,
thing. I'll say it has to be sweet iced tea, and I hear
iced
it's
tea.
really good. And then
Very
so
sweet.
kind of switching gears and moving on to a little bit of history, not too deep, but what kind of things happen in the South that kind of everybody in the United States knows about?
Well, the big one, and this is it was North and South, but I think that the biggest is the Civil War. You hear about that, and what's interesting is we learn about it in school, especially in when I was in school, we learned a lot about the different battles, and it was very much, oh, the South is great until they started getting deep. And if you remember when you were a teenager, we went to up to Washington D.C.
Yeah,
and we went to one of the battlefields up there, which was Gettysburg, and it was a whole different. It was almost like a whole different war. The way that it was, learning it up in the north, you learned about so many different. I can't tell you really details, but is the way it's presented was so different up north as you know than in the south. So that was, and contrary to popular belief, it wasn't only about slavery.
right.
You hear that all the time about the Confederacy is all about slavery and all that, and really what it came down to was the states wanting to be able to decide things for themselves versus the federal government. They wanted to be their own, and that slavery was one of those issues. But the big thing was that. So I think that's a big misconception that
Right.
people have about the South, is that that it was all about that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's probably the one of the biggest, most defining things. Everything kind of a lot of things revolve around that down there.
Yeah, I had a history teacher who he told us about that. He said that, when the North talks about the Civil War, they talk about how the South they were angry with the North and they
Right.
separated, and it was only because of slavery. But the South really, what their purpose was the states' rights. Now, at
Yeah.
the time, it was the states' right to decide if they want to have slavery or not in the state. And so, it was about states' rights, but at the time, one of the big proponents of that was slavery.
Right.
So, that
Right.
was, and I think, it's one of those things where the winner tells the story. And so
Yes.
a lot of
Yes.
times you don't know about the losing side and everything that they thought and that they fought for because they lost. And it's interesting. It's a really interesting topic, and I'm sure in another podcast we'll get to
Right.
that.
That'd be a whole nother one.
Yeah, that could be a whole series. Um,
Right.
and then in terms of like natural landscapes and attractions and things, um, is there anywhere that if someone were to go to the United States and say, I'm going to go to the South, is there anywhere that they need to go, somewhere that they must go? Or is there a place that you've been to that you thought was, really great and you would recommend it to anybody?
Well, what's really kind of cool. I grew up in a relative. It was small town at the time, and it has grown to be a very large town now. It's called Roswell, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of going back a little bit to that Civil War era. What one of the things that happened during the Civil War was Sherman's march to the sea, and he marched through Georgia and different places going to Savannah to the sea, and he burned everything along the way. So many of those beautiful antebellum mansions and houses that you see pictures of, they were burnt. They burnt the fields. They burnt everything along the way. If anybody's ever watched Gone with the Wind, you see that where everything was burnt in Atlanta. And he had a friend. I don't remember the exact story or names or anything, but had a friend, acquaintance, somebody in Roswell that he respected, I guess. So he did not burn Roswell. And so there's I don't know, I hope they're still there, that they kept some of the one or a couple of the plantation houses and some of the buildings in downtown Roswell still have that old Southern look to it. So it's kind of a neat place to visit because you can see some of that old South. One of the places that we've gone, and I know you've been there, we went to Stone Mountain.
Yeah.
And that was where also one of those battles, and that's a very cool place to go. It's just this big, huge granite rock that came out of the earth. And there's a lot of, it used to be just that. Now it's basically an amusement park, but still a good place. You can climb to the top and you can look out over all of the landscape.
Where's that one place we went that you can see?
Tennessee.
Yeah.
Lookout Mountain.
Yeah, Lookout Mountain.
We went to Lookout Mountain and Ruby Falls. That's Georgia and Tennessee. Actually, you drive around a mountain to get to the top, and you're going around, and you're in Georgia, then you're in Tennessee, and then you're in Georgia, and then you're in Tennessee. So you kind of go and see all of that in that Rock City.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like waterfalls and things. There's Ruby Falls, which is inside of the mountain, but then there's a lot like there's Anna Ruby Falls, there's Alacalola, go up to Helen, Georgia. There's so many things to go see, but the mountains there, the Appalachian Mountains, are just beautiful.
Yeah, no, definitely. Those are good recommendations. I agree. What could you tell us a little about, that happened in regards to music and art? If there's anything that really came from the South that you think has made a large contribution to the United States?
Well, there's you always hear Southern rock. Southern rock is kind of obviously came from the South. There's bluegrass music. It's a very like twangy country, lots of banjos. So that's all very, very Southern. There's a lot of kind of folk songs and things. For me personally, though, growing up near Atlanta is a big cultural center, and which is kind of cool because it's just a place where people came together. Mm-hmm. My dad took me to symphonies and to like art festivals, so that's not very Southern, but it is, as far as Atlanta is concerned, it's always been a very cultural kind of place, very diverse place. But then we used to go to this place called Coweta County, which is where I still have cousins that live there. And they have a big county fair, and lots of people there selling, just crafts, arts and crafts and things like that. And they had a lot of kind of Southern bluegrass music, things like that.
No, definitely. Very cool. Yeah. No, those are all very good music, genres and things that I like. I know the South, there was a lot of a lot of R&B, a lot of soul, a lot of
That's
really,
true.
really
That's in
different.
rap. Rap started in Atlanta.
I would say rap came from the South too. I like
So
rap
if you're
a lot.
thinking more nowadays, more modern stuff,
Yeah,
a
no,
lot of the hip
definitely.
hop and rap, I think, kind of came from
Yeah.
there.
And then last week when we were talking on our podcast, Austin and we talked a little bit about the South and how, we think it's a very good place, a nice place to be, but we're coming back to English. How are the dialects in the South? How would you describe the accents, or the
The,
different things that are kind of done?
right. I think people kind of they describe it as lazy, kind of a lazy English. Like they would say, "Y'all, what are y'all doing today?"
Right,
Uh, which is you all. There it's, and I think depending on, like we said, like the Southern gentlemen and Southern belles are a little more. I wish I could just pop it out, just start saying it for you, but I'm not very good at it. If you're a Southern belle, you kind of talk like this, as opposed to being in the South in the country, you might talk like this.
I think you did very good. those were those were pretty spot on. Those were pretty good. They were able. Do you think that it's a little difficult to understand people from the South sometimes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I sometimes can't understand my own relatives
Yeah,
when I've been away too long. We have uh other family that lives in Arkansas, which is another southern state, not southeastern. Sometimes when we go down there, when we talk to them right at first, we might have trouble
yeah.
sometimes understanding a few things when we first get there.
I have my dad's uncle lives in Arkansas. I remember one time I asked him something, and I did not understand a word he said. He was, it was, and what was, I asked him to repeat, and it was incredible. But after, it's one of those things that once you listen to it for a while, you start to understand it a lot better.
It's
And
like talking to somebody with like an Irish from Ireland or something. Like at first you're like, what? What are they saying? And then after a few minutes, you catch right on
oh,
for
definitely.
us. But it would be hard for somebody that
I
didn't
think,
speak English.
yeah, I agree. I always tell people that, I think for me, I'm kind of lucky that I'm from a place that doesn't have a super strong, we have an accent, but our
Right.
accent isn't difficult to understand. A lot of movies and everything have our accent in it, and so people tend to understand me a lot better than they do people from other countries and other places that are very different. But what, kind of getting into a more serious thing. Do you think that there's any stereotypes or misconceptions that people often say about the South that you don't think they're not completely accurate or true?
I think it's kind of funny that you say seriously because it's actually kind of funny. It's something the word that came to mind or comes to mind is the word hillbilly. Some people you may have watched the TV show from way back when it was probably even before I was born called the Beverly Hillbillies. And they're just very country, very silly, very not smart, very kind of dumb. Nobody understood how anything worked in the real world, and they dressed on just kind of rags, and I'm sure there are people that do, but it's this conception that everybody in the South is that way, and that we're all just don't you don't know what's going on in the modern world, but that is absolutely not true.
Right. No, definitely. I agree
I
with
mean,
you.
there are some people.
Yeah, I think, obviously there's cases and cases, but I think the South is just, it's not what people always think. So many people, especially I think, from living in Southern Illinois, what's interesting is when you go up north, they treat you like you're from the South. and we're from the southern part, close to St. Louis. And when you move up to Chicago and you go to those places
Right.
and you talk to them, they talk a different way and they treat you like you don't know anything, like you're uneducated. And
Yeah.
it's a little unfair because, it's just because of where you're from doesn't mean that you don't know things,
Right.
it doesn't decide who you are. And so, but yeah, I think that's a really big one. And I'm glad you brought that up. But I think we're just about out of time here on the podcast. Is there anything that you wanted to say or tell anybody that's listening?
I just like to say, y'all come back now. You hear?
Thanks. Wonderful. But thank you everybody for listening this week. I'm very grateful for my mom to be able to come and talk to you guys. I hope you were able to learn a lot of new words, a lot of new things. And please come back for the next week on Blood Talk, and we're really excited. Follow us on all the social platforms you can, because we'll keep you updated, and you can always send us your suggestions or any questions that you may have. If you have questions for my mom, I can guarantee that she'll be back on another episode. So send those to me, and we'll answer them. We'll get all your answers out as
For
soon as
sure.
we can. But yeah, thank you guys, and have a wonderful day, wonderful night, a wonderful week. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time on Blood Talk.